Welcome to New South Wales Government's Business Connect webcasts on business disruption. I'm Josh Angus, a Business Connect advisor at the Business Centre. Business Connect is a dedicated program funded by the New South Wales Government and delivered through a network of independent service providers to help you start or grow your small business. Tonight we're talking about cybersecurity, what it is, its impact on small businesses, and what you can do to protect yourself, your business, and your clients. For many businesses that are shaking off the dust of 2020 and heading back into the office, it's a great time to implement new processes and systems, especially if they're areas you've been putting off actioning in the past. Data breaches are happening more often, cyber criminals are getting craftier, and the amount of compromised data is increasing rapidly. Another uncomfortable fact is that most companies are completely unprepared for breaches, even though they're becoming more commonplace by the day. It's crucial for businesses to be proactive about cybersecurity and put protective measures in place before disaster strikes. 2020 was a year of uncertainty, and with sudden adjustments, some organisations have responded well to the challenges and others maybe not. However, the new normal is here to stay for a while. So how can small and medium businesses in Australia prepare themselves for data security in 2021 and beyond? To understand how to protect your business from cyber attack, I'm joined by cybersecurity experts Ted Egan and David Gorton. Thank you guys very much for coming on and chatting with us this evening. Ted, you grew up in Western New South Wales, and how did you end up founding what became a global cybersecurity firm, Threat Matrix and Trust Defender? And how did you go from far Western New South Wales to that? How did you get into cybersecurity?
I guess started in back of Burke. Grew up on a property in the outback, and I guess where my career sort of started was I had a number of uncles who were in the Air Force, and they kind of talked me into various different things. I wanted to join the Navy, so I decided that, when I was old enough, I'd go and join the Navy, and that sort of took me down the technical sort of end and onto a submarine, and the rest is history. I sort of got that sort of liking to what goes on behind the scenes, especially on submarines and all the technology and so forth, and it led me into, I left the Navy after a decade, went on to work in the advertising industry for a very short time, and then we founded, I helped some other guys found another company called KidsNet, which is safe internet access for kids and families, and that was really because the internet was really the Wild West then, and there was a lot of very bad stuff on the internet. And we developed, some of the first, like everyone knew about NetNanny back then, but it wasn't online, it was on a CD. So we developed the first ever online sort of version of NetNanny. Went on after that, I got out of that in just prior to 2000. That went on to, I worked in the industry around working for Intel and HP Consulting and various companies. And then later on we founded Trust Defender. And the reason Trust Defender came about was because when we looked at security and antivirus and everything, the average everyday person had no idea what security was. They knew about security, they knew they had to have an antivirus solution, they had no idea what to look for, from malware to compromised computers. And
do you think that's changed much to now, that people are more aware?
Wow, it's funny. I was sitting in a talk like this a couple of months ago, and the same conversations we were having in 2004, 2005, they were still having today. And it really showed me that, after building a $1 billion business and growing it around the globe, we were still talking about the same things. So, the people still have problems. People don't really know. The average everyday person at home, the business user, the corporate, has very little knowledge of what to look for. There is a lack of training, awareness training. Not so much technical training, but just awareness of what to look for. Businesses don't really have a plan. So what do they do if they're confronted by a ransomware attack or malware on their computer? And even if they do have a plan, it's put in the drawer and never looked at again. so they don't go and revisit those plans. So, and it's important that you revisit those plans every 6 to 12 months, even if you've got the right security posture in the first place.
Yeah, so we'll circle back and come back and do a bit more of a deep dive into that as well. And so, David, you're founder of a local cybersecurity firm, Novacastrian Cyber Security Solutions.
Solutions, yep.
So again, you know, what got you into that space?
Well, I think for those people who grew up when I did, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, so we had stone tablets and clay to send messages. So it was quite archaic. But as I grew up, I fell in love with Star Trek and all this technology, you know, that's going to be there. So when computers came along, I was a kid in the candy shop. So I really got into writing software using DOS. My first computer was a VZ200 with a cassette tape. I could actually load it up, and it would take 10 to 15 minutes to load up a game. Then I could play the game, and it was, you know, it was fantastic. Then I joined the Air Force, and that just boosted that entire
it's interesting
genre.
you've both come from a military background and ended up
and
in
I think it's the security aspect of, and we both have that security training. I got out of the Air Force, and I actually watched a Robert Redford movie called Sneakers. You may remember it, and they were hackers, you know, breaking in. And I thought, wouldn't that be a great job? Wouldn't it be great? So I built, if you like, in 1993, I built this business model around breaking into people's businesses, whether computer or physically. And unfortunately, it didn't go anywhere. It was a bit too early in Australia. So I got into managed services, I got into healthcare, and I really started to notice that security was not a big part of what people did. They had a username and a password, but you just had that written down on a piece of paper on the back of the keyboard. It didn't matter. Everyone knows that password, everyone knows that username. But we then, in the early 2000s, we started to realise that security was a critical part of what we did. So that's when I really started to kick into gear and start to push. So every IT manager's job that I took on, one of my jobs was to increase security, put the best security we could with the money that we had, put that in place so that people's information could be safe, you know. And as it evolved, I got into MSP, into managed service providers. Their sort of take on security wasn't quite my take, so I was always trying to get them to go a little bit further. And then I thought, it's probably time that I did the cybersecurity thing. So I came back from Sydney, came back to Newcastle, and opened up Novacastrian IT, which is now Novacastrian Cyber Solutions. And it's been an amazing run, because I've found that regional Australia, they have this need for cybersecurity. Everyone knows what it is, but there's not enough expertise or not enough people going out there doing the education, as Ted said, doing that education, which is critical to the success of any business or anyone at all. To at least you can deal with 80% of any sort of possible breaches can be dealt with at the computer, like the person sitting behind the keyboard. The other 20% we can take care of, or at least fortify, so that we can help you take care of those things. But that was what drove me into wanting to really build a cybersecurity company. And I think one of my first big clients that I went to see, they're patching. For instance, if you patch your computers, 99.9% patched. One person, that's all he did all day was patch. And I thought, wow, the guy must be a lunatic by now, but he wasn't. But we then did a vulnerability scan, an internal vulnerability scan. We came up with close to 700 vulnerabilities.
So we've got someone that his sole job is to patch computers, make sure they're secure, make sure everything is safe. And yet there's still 700 vulnerabilities where a cyber attack could take place. And they've got entry. And so, I mean, the statistics are quite frankly frightening on just how many cyber attacks there are daily around the world, within Australia. You know, something along the lines of 70% of small businesses have experienced an attempted cyber attack, whether successful or not, but an attempt. which I think really highlights the importance of making sure your security is up to scratch. You know, we've got client data, client information, credit card details potentially, staff information, sensitive information, and we've got to make sure that we protect that. So where would you say to people that you talk to about small businesses, where should they start? If they don't have a cybersecurity plan right now, they maybe just have antivirus software, and they're small, right? And they feel like, who's going to attack me? I'm a small business, maybe 1 or 2 employees, maybe none. Where should they be starting?
Well, in my opinion, is they need to get advice. If they don't really know, go and ring someone who is a specialist in that area and get that advice. Yes, get that advice. Put in place a plan. I know that it sounds a pretty simple thing to do, but put in place a plan. But in that plan, you will have processes like cultural training. So what to be aware of. We talk about 70-80% of businesses have these attacks, but most times people don't really know they've had the attacks until it's too late.
Correct.
And the highlight of ransomware attacks of recent times, ransomware attacks happen after they've been attacked. So they've been sitting there idle, collecting all the information, encrypting the systems logs or the databases, and and then they have the attack, and then that's too late.
What's the timeline from being compromised to then having that attack?
Look, statistics at the moment are saying around you could have someone sitting in your network or ransomware sitting there for anything up to 300 days, so nearly a year. So if someone's sitting in your network, they're either exfiltrating data out, you don't even know it. If there's ransomware, they're just waiting for the right time after they've turned off your backups that give you success because they're only backing up one file, so you're not really checking them. So there's a lot of planning. Remember, these are cyber criminals. They're organised crime, they're not disorganised crime. And they will make sure that when the ransom needs to be paid, you've got no way of getting back to where you are. But there are simple things that you can put in place. And I think one of the first things I find when I go and talk to a client is I ask them about security awareness training, first thing. And I'm happy if someone takes us on and says, hey, look, can you come and do that? Sure, we'll come and help you plan. We'll actually come in and do the cybersecurity training as part of what we do. Because I'm a firm believer that if people know what they're looking for, they're going to feel a lot more comfortable. And plus, if you have this culture, this security culture, people are not going to feel frightened to step up and go, hey, I think I might have clicked on a link I shouldn't have.
Interestingly, people subliminally, once you've done the training, you're subliminally looking for things that you're not really looking for. And you're identifying threats, and you see that link coming in the email, which you would have normally clicked on. You would have, and subliminally it tells you, in the back of your brain, you don't click on it anymore. Or you go and get advice, or you advise whoever's looking after your security to have a look at it. These are important things to do. But, I'll take it one step backwards. Every business is a digital business. Whether you connect to your business using your mobile phone, or you connect to the business using your laptop or whichever. You interact with your customers online. So it's very important that you have customers coming in online and they're able to browse catalogues, they're able to put in orders, they're able to make purchases, pay invoices, all those things online. So you are a digital business, regardless of whether you're a small business, and the smallest of small businesses have a digital footprint in some way or form. You have an email address, okay, or you're on a chat through an app. So you need to remember that you are a digital business and you need to put in place practices. And if you don't know the ins and outs of cybersecurity, it's worth talking to people and talking to experts.
Can we trust that the data that we're collecting and moving through third-party providers is sufficiently secure. Stripe or PayPal for payments, WhatsApp for messaging, or even Facebook Messenger for particularly some micro businesses. Can we trust that the information that we're sharing across third-party providers is safe? Do we have a responsibility to ensure safety there as a small business owner?
So, you do
Yes.
have a responsibility. However, when you sign up to these third-party providers, you are signing an agreement with them. There is a terms and conditions, which you probably should read. I advise everyone to read their T's and C's. I like reading T's and C's.
It's a heap of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, if you've got to sign contracts all the time, you should read your T's and C's. But the point is, these businesses wouldn't be in business if they didn't put in place their own cybersecurity practices. But you always check. Just ask the provider to provide. What happens to my data? Where is it stored? How is it stored? How is the data stored at rest? How is the data stored in transit or TLS? What sort of encryption standards is it AES standard? What standard are they applying to my data? There are quite a few things that you should look at, and this is again where you should have your expert come in and take a look. Furthermore, you look at what are your best practices to put in place. It's we talked about backups and so forth.
We have, yes.
So I'm a firm believer to put in like a father-son strategy when it comes to backups, where you might do your daily, weekly backup, and you'll do a monthly backup, and you'll store them separately.
Right. So different backups stored different places.
Yes. Yeah. And the reason that is that you give yourself some sort of ability to maybe breach the period in which the ransomware or a threat was embedded into your system.
So then you can restore it back to a week ago, a day ago, a month ago, and your data will be, maybe you're missing a little bit, but most of your data is not compromised.
What a lot of people do is because when you're starting a small business, many times you'll use a third party to provide the security capabilities you can't, or provide you outsource your database, you outsource your, how you do your payments to a third party. When you grow bigger, you'll start implementing your IDS, IDPS, so systems, and that's basically to detect threats and prevent threats. And then maybe as you get larger, you might invest in a SIEM. So a SIEM is so you can manage multiple different applications on your network rather than one. So these are the different stages of your business, and you can outsource all that to third parties, but you need to make sure that you check what are the checks and balances to make sure that they're not going to be compromised. And you need to be satisfied that they have put in place all the best practices themselves if you're not doing it yourself internally.
Right. So we've all mentioned having a plan. I think the thing about a plan is you can know that you need to make a plan. You need to make a plan about cybersecurity, but you don't know where to start. What is, the starting is the plan, right? But what is the first step to the plan? I mean, businesses on a budget may not be able to afford, or may not think they can afford, a cybersecurity firm to come in and consult with them and advise them through it. So micro businesses and small businesses, startups, where do they start? What's the top 3 things I guess they have to get done?
Look, I agree with Ted. The first thing you want to do is talk to an expert. That's one of the things that we do is we talk to our clients first, because we need to know where they feel the gaps are, and then once we get a better feel, we can then start to talk to them about a plan. Okay, they might say to us, I only back up once a week. You say, okay, well that's definitely on my list. So just from a conversation, we can sort out what they need to do. Now, we could say, this is what you need to do. If you're happy to do that, there you go. You know, go and implement that. There is lots and lots of information on the internet. It's a great place to find what steps to take. But I always come back to that your job is not cybersecurity. Your job is to run your business and, you know, sell your product or sell your services. Our job is to advise and help people with their cybersecurity, and I think that's a big thing. So whatever you can afford, we can normally just fit in around what we can do to help out. So to me, first thing is that conversation needs to take place. Because I think if you go onto the internet and you try and read through everything about cybersecurity and you're going to implement it, you're going to be overloaded, significantly overloaded with what this thing is. What do I need to get some sort of ISO certification thingy, or don't I? You know, so those are the sorts of questions that we can normally answer.
I'd go a little bit further in saying that, yes, the internet has a lot of information out there, so it's worth doing your own research.
Yes.
You know, when you're putting a plan together, research it. Okay, get the advice, research the information. Have a look at the basics. We talked about training.
Yes.
There's lots of videos that you can watch on the internet. You know, it's cheap, it's free in most cases.
Yes.
And you can watch some of these videos. So you're implementing a culture approach to it, to changing the culture, subliminal culture within your business to know what to look for. When you get a little bit serious, you want to implement proper training. You know, what is phishing? What is farming? What are these links that come in? What is what you know people will refer to as CEO fraud, where the CEO pays the bills and he shouldn't have paid the bills because he just clicked on it and thought he was paying what he was told to by the CFO. Yeah. Or whoever's your finance manager said prove it, and you proved it, and you just paid out $100,000, which would sink your business if you're a small business.
Absolutely.
You know, once you've done those sort of little basic things, make sure your backups are put in place. You know, there's no correct answer to everything, but there is a process by which you would put those backups in place. There's quite a few other things that you'll do, but there are three base things that you do. The one thing I'll say about a plan, if you do have a plan, don't just put it in the drawer. You have to come back. The technology, it has to
be a living document. Right?
Yeah,
Constantly review.
Technology and threats are changing at such a rate, and you read about it in the paper every day, and even the most sophisticated corporations are being stung. You know, we're looking at what happened to the pipeline company, oil pipeline, Colonial in the US. I mean, that you would think they supply probably 45% of the east coast of America's petroleum, avgas, and so forth.
There's certainly been some major, huge companies that have had devastating impacts.
Agriculture here, lately. JBS.
Yes.
JBS, Australian, a global company with operations targeted here in Australia.
Yeah, and there was a Norwegian, I think it was Norwegian energy company, and they turned off water treatment and water plants, and it affected 80% of the population. So, I mean, these are huge organisations that they're going after.
These are ones that have spent a lot of money on cybersecurity.
Yes.
These are people who have put in place practices, but people get sloppy. So, hence why you tend to revisit these plans over and over again, making sure that even if you have the guy that sits there doing the patching,
that's right,
that you make sure you do your pen testing.
Pen testing,
so penetration testing.
Right.
So normally, it doesn't matter what you are. Like every business that I've been in, even though that we've had our own internal people to write our software, we have our own QA, we've got all those things implemented. We always went outside to have a third party, someone who could come in and have a look and try and break what we just built, all the security settings, and we would use that data that we'd learn to actually, and then we would rectify those weaknesses, so that basically it's a blinker effect. So what happens when you're running a business? You think you've got everything covered, and it doesn't matter how good you think you are, and you might have all the checks and balances, but there's always places where you got blinkers, where you don't see the threats.
I think you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
You can't know about something that you don't understand. And I think the more awareness there is, and David, you talked about education, I think that's so crucial in this space.
It is, and I think one of the things too that and sort of going on from what Ted was saying, is that with our clients, one of the things we don't do for our clients is we do not do pen testing. We will engage a third party, because we would simply be testing what we do. And I mean, who's not going to be biased? But we will always engage a third party to test our clients. We do not use ourselves. We'll pen test for other people, but we don't use them on our clients. And I think one of the things too is that you have your external pen testing, see if someone can get in and penetrate your network, but you've got to make sure that the internal vulnerability scanning is done as well, because that's where you will discover out of 150 PCs, you may have 600 or 700 other vulnerabilities that are not able to be patched.
And accidents happen, or
exactly.
people. You can have the best intentions in your business, but accidents happen, and all it is just to make sure that those accidents don't happen, and it's not to have any attack on any people. It's basically just to make sure your business posture or your security posture is maintained at the highest level possible.
So with people now working in this hybrid model of work from home, work from the office, some are not returning to the office, some are doing this hybrid, we're seeing more and more bring your own device. Most of us now, particularly in the white collar sector, but also even in trades, have work mobile phones. Again, sometimes a bring your own device. What about vulnerabilities there? How does a business manage vulnerabilities from a device that's not theirs?
Yeah, just quickly, I'll just tell you, years ago I was asked to write a BYOD policy, and I said to them, so bring your own disaster, because that's what I felt, because it was a school, and they were going to let the kids bring their own laptops and their own iPads, and I was just thinking that you got this cartoon image of all these grubs and things just crawling through the malware, just waiting to come onto your network. So that was it was of concern then, and for me it's still of concern, because you need to make sure that people are patching, they're running the AV that is approved by you. There's got to be some, because even though it's their asset, the data assets are yours, and that's what you've got to start to look at. What experience have you had with that, Ted?
I think there's a minimum standard that you've got to apply. You can't have people having completely unauthenticated, insecure devices coming in, or jailbroken mobile phones and so forth coming in and then connecting to your network. And you need to make sure that there is a minimum standard applied by your business, no matter if it's a small business or a large business. And then you've got to police it. There needs to be a way of policing it to ensure that there is no vulnerability that you have now opened up in your business, that you've spent all your money and effort and time and culturally changing internally to ensure you have the best security practices in place. And then you have your staff working from home. I got to say, COVID-19 was a game changer for a lot of businesses. There was a lot of businesses who would tell you they were a very digital business and they could, they were up to date and everything. And then, for 3 or 4 months after March,
Yes.
There was a scramble. They're still scrambling today. And so there needs to be a posture applied to your staff when they're working from home. Harvey Norman did a great, every computer store was run out of cables and things like that. But there was also the firewall issue, the routers, and what type of security are they able to validate the security of the mobile device or the laptop that is being taken home, and can they connect through a secure VPN?
Bringing up VPN, I think, brings up an interesting thing as well, right? Because if your organisation runs on a VPN in the office or in the workspace, but then you at home on your home network are not connecting through that VPN, can you, I guess, pick up malware on your device, on your home network or on a public network, or at the cafe or something like this, particularly with this hybrid work model? And then when you come back into the office, connecting into the VPN, are you then potentially breaching the whole office's network?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I mean, to me, that seems really concerning. The more I talk to you guys, the more I get concerned. I mean, we particularly, we go out and see clients all over the place. We might connect to a Wi-Fi at a cafe, and people do this all the time at shopping centres and cafes and restaurants, their home network, clicking on the wrong link, not even knowing something's gone wrong, can sit on my device for 300 days and then infiltrate the whole organisation.
Yeah.
So it really, really speaks to that, making sure you've got the backups, making sure you've got the security up to scratch.
I think one of the things, particularly when it comes to free Wi-Fi, is how free is it really? And it's unfortunate that hackers, people who are quite nefarious in what they do, they will sit there. They can sit there with a laptop. They can do what they call a man-in-the-middle attack. They can be the Wi-Fi point. You hook into them. They then put you onto the free, and they're in the middle, and they'll start to exfiltrate data off, and then put their stuff on. And this is the dangers you have with free Wi-Fi. The other one too is that all those lovely cables that the airport gives that you can plug your phone into and you can charge up. That's great. I think in the United States there was a PowerPoint that people would plug into, and behind that was a chip, and the guy simply sat there as people plugged in. They just exfiltrated data off their iPhones, off everything that came through that USB. So, you've got to be so wary. I mean, there are companies who do not allow you to charge your phone on their power at all. You can't even take a phone into there and I want to just charge up. No, you can't do that. You can't charge your phone. So people are becoming very savvy with what they do and how they do it. But yes, you're right. As soon as you take your laptop back in to work and there's no checking of that security posture or those sorts of things, that's where you start running into trouble.
I think in small business it's more an issue. You do see it in big corporations. I know when we sold ThreatMetrix to our new owners, I guess one of the things was that, what was my biggest fear, and my biggest fear was the company that bought us, did they have the same security standards of us or better? And I did notice that they did apply different standards after we came on board, because the issue was that we kind of, ThreatMetrix was about validating, verify, authenticating every piece of data. We'd profile a device. We'd look at a device at over 800 or 900 different attributes on the device. We'd look for anomalies. That technology was not used by everyone in the world, but we would build it. We had thousands of banks using our technology, large e-commerce providers using our technologies, credit card companies using our technologies. And then you'd have, quite nicely, we saw other people trying to create similar digital identity solutions. And that was great for business. But when you're a small business, you don't have access to a lot of these things. And you are vulnerable, therefore, your smartphones may be, 90% of, and they're connecting to the internet. You've got to make sure that, are you patching those devices? Are they patched? And as a small business, when someone connects to your network, you need to be able to, this is why you have the IDS, IDPS type solutions, is to identify, is that device patched that's connecting to your network. Usually you run a DMZ or a demilitarized zone, sort of separate zone, so that they can connect to the internet, but they can't connect to your databases directly. So these are things where your security experts who will come in and they will talk to you about that and what is the best practice. So if you believe you have sensitive data,
I
it's
think
most
everybody
important
has some sort of sensitive data.
but sometimes it's your IP, it's your whole business.
Yes, that's right.
And you don't want someone stealing that intellectual property that you've developed for the last 10 years, and that being used by a third party and sold on the internet, on the dark web or whichever, and that puts you out of business day one.
So we've talked about a few different types of cyber attacks. What do you think is most common? To me, it's probably ransomware. Like, I don't know if maybe I watch too many movies, but being locked out and you've got a demand for a cash payment to be or a cryptocurrency payment to be made. One, should we pay if it's being demanded? And two, what are the most common types of cyber attacks?
Well, I think both Ted and I agree. You shouldn't pay the ransom. Because I think when you pay the ransom, it tells the hackers that one, you've got something of value, right? And two, you're not prepared. So
you're making yourself even more of a target. You've got the money to do it and you're trying to protect something.
Yeah.
One of the problems with paying ransom, and look, sometimes ransomware is paid, ransomware threats are paid out, and the reason they're paid out is to get that business back up and running. But more and more you see some cyber criminals who will do a ransomware attack and lock down and encrypt your system. They don't really have the keys. They'll just get the money and you'll be left there.
So you've paid them and you're still locked out. Yeah.
The second part is really that you've got to understand, last couple of years, part of my job was to build these authentication solutions, digital identity solutions into businesses. But really it was to stop money laundering and human trafficking. So as much as you think that's a ransomware attack and you just pay that money, what they do is then they use that money for somewhere else, criminals. And, very nasty things like child labour, human trafficking, money laundering, it goes into cryptocurrency. And
cybercrime's it's a profitable business for them, and then it's funding.
It funds other things, okay? So, some smart criminals will launder it into stocks, oil and gas and cryptocurrency and so forth, and then they'll boost their income. So they'll transition from being really bad to being legitimate. Then you'll see, they do.
I love it.
Then you see the other cyber criminal who will use that money for further bad things. They'll launder that money through casinos and so forth. They will launder that money into trafficking people around the planet, which is a very, very nasty thing. And in modern day, that happens every day.
Yep.
And, and you find that it's a big vicious circle. So the smallest of crimes, which is maybe, once upon a time you would say that petty thief who turns into a cyber thief, who then turns into a more of a corporate criminal, who then turns into money laundering, trafficking, buying stocks in companies, which then can really affect economies. So there's a lot of use cases that the bad guys undertake, but even that smallest little cybercrime in your smallest little business, who you think doesn't really count, can sometimes affect a lot of other supply chain or things down the track.
So I mean, that's ransomware, and I think that's because it's in the news. But what I see is there's a lot of malware, there's a lot of what they call bots. You would have heard of botnets. People getting their computers taken over by other machines.
Yeah.
So they have these very big. So cyber criminals have a very large network of computers that they can call on and create attacks and use it to denial of service and those sorts of attacks. So malware happens, and it can happen if you just go to the wrong website. They can straight away click on the link, nothing happened. Oh, I clicked on that link, nothing happened. Oh, but actually there was a remote access Trojan put on there, so people can actually now get into your network and have a look. So they've actually used your computer as a access station, if you like, to get on and start exploring the network and find.
So what can they do in there? Access all of your files. Access
what they do,
everything remotely.
It's doing it remotely, and they're looking and they're searching for the family jewels. They're looking for the valuable assets that
the keys.
Yep. So they can say, oh, there's a database there that's got pretty poor security. Let's get the data off that. It's gone. They'll just copy it. It's gone.
So what about those? Again, maybe it's just too many TV shows, but those. To me, you get a virus clicking on a dodgy link or downloading something or something, and it just results in lots of pop-ups. I mean, what do they even get out of this?
Well, it's all about information.
Yeah.
So espionage information, it may be estate-based, it may be other corporates for an espionage piece or another state, foreign entity. It's not necessarily the kids in the back rooms. There's very professional groups today that can do these attacks. I mean, arguably, the people on the beef industry attack recently here in Australia, they were very sophisticated crime gang based in Russia, and they decided to bring down a very large firm which processes our meat that we export overseas and processes it here locally. They can be anything from, so the pop-ups and things probably were more in our earlier days.
They were the joke, if you like.
They were the joke.
Right.
But the reality of it is there is an outcome. People want money, or it may be someone's resentful, and this, attacks can happen internally, where you have an employee who goes rogue within the business, and you need to protect against. And we talked about the internal checks and balances to make sure that employees don't go rogue and open up doors or do attacks on the staff or do nefarious activities,
either knowingly or unknowingly.
Yeah. So there's those things to look out for, but look, it's always, the more and more you'll see about this on TV, read in the paper every day, the high profile ones are the ones that are asking for millions and so forth, tens of millions. They're bringing down utilities. What scares me the most is that, by taking out that little small business over there, and they take out 10 small businesses, they may be able to also take out a bigger business such as a utility.
Correct.
Or they take out the Defence Department, or you can't get the aircraft off the ground to fight a war, should it get to that sort of level. So,
everything's connected to our internet, right?
Yeah, and we rely on it. Just turn your phone off for a week, on your computer for a week.
Yep.
Try it.
I don't know that I'm ready to try it.
Yeah, just try it.
You concern me with what you say, but I don't know if I'm ready to go without it.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. There are other countries around the world who have disconnected their whole country from the World Wide Web. And it was like a DR, disaster recovery. How would that country operate without being connected to the World Wide Web? I mean, I'd like to see that happen here in Australia. How would we operate as a country?
What does that look like? Like an internal internet, but for the localised, basically.
Yeah.
And we used to do that. There was a thing called RNet between the universities way back in the early days. And that's how the universities communicated before there was the World Wide Web. It still exists today.
Because the World Wide Web's relatively new, right? I mean, it's 97?
No,
maybe?
Probably 94.
93, 94.
Yeah.
No? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm only born in 92, so I don't even know a world without the internet.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
You know, I got my first ever computer. I thought the internet was going to take off, and that was at school in Burke, and we got the first ever Apples was sent to us at the school, and I think there was 6 of them and sat in the maths department, and you all lined up, and there was a class on programming. So those days, and then my phone number was a Morse code, and it was a party line out in the bush.
That's right.
And so I went from the party line Morse code to a little Apple computer at school to realising that this is big. It's a bit like your earlier story.
Yeah.
We have to learn to yes, use the internet. Yes, it's about speed. Business is speed. How quick you could make a transaction. The more transactions, the better. How to scale, all those sort of things. But it's also about what happens if you don't have the internet. Are you able to still operate as a business? And what happens there is that's where it comes back to our backups and disaster recovery and our ability to keep that data secure, encrypted, and in a way that we can go back to that data to the point before the problem happened.
So to wrap up this evening, make a plan, get advice, do the backups, review, revise the plan.
Yes.
Awesome. David, Ted, thank you so much for joining us tonight to talk about these important issues for small and medium businesses. I certainly learnt a lot, like phone numbers being in Morse code, but anyway. If you would like I'd like to recommend the Business Connect program, which is a dedicated program funded by the New South Wales Government and delivered through a network of independent service providers to help you start or grow your small business. If you would like a business advisory session subsidised by the New South Wales Government under the Business Connect program, you can call 1300 134 359 or email contact@treasury.nsw.gov.au. That leads me to thank the amazing team at Fordtronic who provide the expertise and technology behind this webcast and who have been our AV partners over a whole range of projects and who we strongly endorse. If you'd like to talk to them about implementing webcasting as part of your business, please email the Business Centre for contact details. If you'd like to get in touch with David about cybersecurity for your business, again, please email the Business Centre and we'll pass on those details for you.